Welcome into the TWMP Daily. I am Scott Faughn, joined by Jake Crozen. Jake, I enjoyed y'all's conversation with Garrett yesterday.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
I had Erin in here. You had like Erin, her sister, her daughter. It was shrimp-tastic.
Yeah, they almost took over. It was almost an actual Irish takeover.
Well, you invite one, they'll keep coming. But this is a very cool show today. Very grateful for y'all for joining us. We are joined by a guy who, it's almost like sometimes you watch a movement grow and when its time has come. Will Westmoreland, thank you so much for joining us here on the TWMP Daily. I really appreciate your time.
You bet. I got to give you kudos right at the beginning for the choice of signage. That is an eclectic mixture of political behind you. And I don't know if you did it just for me, but my alma mater's football helmet there, loud and proud, right in the front, is great as well. So go Bears.
We've got a collection of them. I almost stole one from Northwest Missouri State unwittingly when we were up there. I think we got one from the Miners coming, don't we?
We should, I think.
Yeah. But we also always are joined by Flat Doug Beck, we put words in his mouth all the time. I don't think he appreciates any of them, but our centerpiece is our Flat Doug Beck, and we kind of work back from there.
I don't want to live in a country where we all can't speak for Senator Beck. There you go.
Well, first of all, tell folks that may not know, I owe my buddy Russ Carnahan a beer. He connected us. Tell folks what you do and what you've been up to.
Well, listen, so before the last election last summer, I'm like a lot of old farmers. I was just sitting there really getting frustrated by what I was hearing at the national level, not only just across the board in politics, but with my own party as well in terms of their effectiveness and ability to reach out to rural voters across the country. And bottom line is, guys, I handed my phone to my oldest son and I said, make me a TikTok account. I've got some things I want to say. And for whatever reason, it just took off. And I'm kind of a mixture of a few different things. I grew up on a cattle farm in Missouri, and when I was 12 years old, and we can talk more about this if we talk about healthcare, but when I was 12 years old, I got my arm caught in the power takeoff on a tractor, and it nearly tore my arm off. And I laid out there in our barnyard for 2 hours waiting for an ambulance to show up. So I got a real hardcore dose of rural healthcare very early on in life. Later, when I moved back to Missouri after doing a stint in corporate America, I operated a 300 cow-calf operation with my family down in Bolivar, Missouri, Polk County. Now I do what I like to call frou-frou farming. I do some agroforestry. I raise mushrooms, but my big project right now is I'm working with a machinist over in Kansas, and we're trying to put together a process to put Chinese chestnuts in one end and have it come out gluten-free flour in the other end. And we're hoping we can buy up product from Missouri farmers to sell around the country. Anyway, what happened is I started talking about rural politics behind the scenes. When my party would say, we just need to win 3% more of rural America and we can win the Congress and the House. Like a lot of other people in rural America, I was like, well, wait a minute. I'd like to win a school board and a county clerk's office and a local representative and Senate race. And so I did a lot of content around that. And then in February, there was a young farmer named Skylar Holden. Just about everybody's heard of Skylar. He's a cattle farmer up by St. Louis. He came onto the internet and he had done rotational grazing expenditures with a promise from the government that they would pay him back. And he had gotten a call saying, you're not going to get your money because all those programs were deemed woke and there were farmers across the country that were told you're not going to get your reimbursements. And he was asking the question on social media, why is this happening to me? And I just did a video saying, here's exactly why this is happening to you. This is the history of, the changeover of rural America from, more purple leaning blue to red and what the ramifications of that have been. And after the election, I was just going to close it all down. We grew to about 500,000 followers on social media, and I didn't know how hard that was to do. I'd just been yapping, and people were listening and following, and my kids were like, Dad, you have no idea how hard it is to do this. You can't just close it down. And I just thought, well, if we're going to keep it open, we're going to do something good with it. So we started this C4 nonprofit called Back 40 Action.
Yep.
And what we're doing, guys, and I know this is a hell of a long elevator speech, but thanks for bearing with me.
No, this is the
Um,
back 40
we're
actions. What I wanted to get to. I'm glad you're. I'm not. That's what we want to talk about.
well, we're going around the country and we're educating people on rural healthcare, rural education in schools, and rural ag policy and economics. And we're walking them through these are the reasons why we're struggling in these areas, and we're advocating for good policies that can impact change to make things better here in rural America. And that's the nuts and bolts of it. And it's just continuing to grow right now. I think one of the main reasons, if I'm being completely honest, is not that I'm a genius, but I think on social media, when somebody pulls up my account and they see an old 57-year-old farmer with a red hat on, they expect one message. And when they get something completely different, I think it just reorganizes their universe a little bit and they tend to follow.
Well, I'll give you a compliment I mean sincerely. When Russ turned me on to what you're doing on Back 40, there's an authenticity. There's a quality of being very genuine, and I want to dig into where some of that comes from because I'll tell you, rural Missouri loves Donald Trump. I think that is just an absolute fact. I don't know how you get around it. Now, and to me, I have a high regard for whoever folks have a vote, however they want to vote. I trust the public's judgment, and I don't really view it my job to tell you did wrong or right either way. But I will say this: that just the facts are, I mean, just as plain as day. Rural, I will just say I don't follow the rest of the country all that closely, but rural Missouri has borne the brunt of President Trump's tariffs. I actually think it'd be a very fine thing to move more manufacturing jobs back to America, and I hope it works. Dick Gephardt fought his whole life for the exact policies Donald Trump's doing right now. Who am I to say Dick Gephardt or Donald Trump is wrong? But I will say in the short term, boy, the farmers are bearing the brunt of this tariff action.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And there's a process that unfolded here, that's specifically responsible for causing this to happen. And,
Break it down for me as
my
a farmer. Break it down. What
yeah,
exactly
well,
what is causing this?
I'll tell you what's going on. So my grandfather used to tell me all the time that number one, if you're going to be a part of something, you got to be its most vocal critic. And we're all participants in this republic of ours, and we just we need to do a better job of not making the mistake of drawing up these partisan lines, and in the process of doing that, defending everything that our party does, regardless of whether it's good or bad for rural America. And that's something that we're all guilty of at one time or another. But
Sure.
what happened specifically with tariffs is this. During Donald Trump's first term, the Chinese were very poorly situated to be able to deal with the tariff issue. They had a really bad disease going through their population. They had very small reserves of row crops, corn, wheat, soybeans is the big one, obviously, in China. They also had no subsidy programs for their own farmers. So if their farmers didn't have a good year, they basically could just completely go under and they'd have to start over from scratch. Well, when we implemented the tariffs, the Chinese, one thing you can't say about them is they don't follow the old motto of turn the other cheek. If you slap them, they plan ahead for the future because they don't want to get slapped again. And that's what they did. And they took some very specific actions that are leading to the pain that rural farmers are feeling right now. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that right now. The first thing they did is that they passed a subsidy program in China similar to what we do in the United States. So now when their farmers have a down year, they get financial compensation for that, and they're able to very quickly rebound back in their growth patterns so that they can keep up better with those cyclical demands for soybean, et cetera. The second thing that they did is they went out and they found a lot of new friends. So back in the day, back during Trump's first term, they bought about 13% of their row crops from Brazil. Okay. That number now stands at just a little bit north of 40%. Now, they not only switched their buying patterns, they made huge financial investments in Brazil. They invested a lot of money in burning down the rainforest so that there would be more areas to grow soybeans and row crops. They put hundreds of millions of dollars into the train and transport system down there to get those row crops to the ports. And then they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on getting those ports updated to be able to handle those commodity ships coming in from China. And what that's
Don't you think it's
resulted in
always been
overall,
highly
yeah,
hypocritical of countries to say, "Oh, Brazil, don't burn the rainforest down," when Brazil's just doing what we did? They're developing their land. It's not their
well, they're
fault that they
meeting the
were last,
demand.
right? Yeah, I mean, it's.
They're
I always
they're
thought that was
they're
hilarious. People
meeting
would
the
say, "Oh, save
demand.
the rainforest." Well, damn it, in southeast Missouri, we drained an entire quadrant of the state so we could farm it. Now I'm going to tell Brazil they can't. I've never understood that.
Well, they're going to meet the demand financially
Sure.
for their own people, and it's a
Yeah,
problem we
as they should.
created. Well, yeah, when China made the decision that, there are a billion bellies over there that we have to feed, and the United States has been doing a really effective job of that for decades. And the problem is when you make an enemy out of China through a tariff program that's not really organized, they're going to go somewhere else to buy those products, and they've got the financial ability to help whatever sourcing country they go to produce the crops that they need, and that's exactly what they did. And now they're doing it with Argentina. They took this subsidy program and applied it to Argentina, and Argentina took that 20 to 40 billion dollars, and they waived all the best way to describe it would be all the sales taxes on soybeans, and ended up selling the greatest number of soybeans in their history to the Chinese
You mean
government,
to tell
and the
me?
Chinese didn't have to pay taxes.
You mean to tell me this country that for some reason, I actually am the Ukraine thing to me at first. I'm a kid from the '80s. I thought, well, we should fight Ukraine. Senator Schmidt told me one time. He said, "Is there anybody in Pettis County that gives a damn about Ukraine?" And I was like, "Well, you know what? There's not. That's a good point." And it kind of made me think differently. Well, I don't know anybody in West Butler County, where I'm from, that gives a damn about Argentina. It was very frustrating. Now that cattle prices are in that cycle where cattle farmers are making
Right.
money, you want to buy this crappy Argentinian beef, and then we're buying these worthless pesos. I'm sorry, I don't see how that's America first. Now you're telling me not only are we propping up what Donald Trump would call a shithole country, we're propping them up, and now they're selling China soybeans to undercut our folks while we prop them up.
It's worse than that. They're selling China soybeans, and they're not making China pay the tax on those soybeans because they got a bailout from the United States government that allows them to waive the taxes on the crops that they're selling in place of the American crops.
Why? Why? Give me your honest opinion. I understand the back 40. I get it. I enjoy it. I enjoy the perspective. But maybe take the back 40 hat off and the Democrat hat off. Give me your analytical reason as a farmer as to why in the hell America will be propping up a country who's doing this.
Well, I think people are still asking that question. They're taking off the political hat. I'm just talking about what I've read on
Yeah.
both sides of the aisle from people that are looking into the issue, is that we've got some very powerful people in this country. They're heavily invested in South America. They're heavily invested in the peso. And, I think a lot of people are asking the question, like they do with many things, is what's the grift here in the long term? Who's going to make money off of, Argentina and their economic system being boosted or bailed out? I don't think, in all honesty, I don't think we know the answer to that question yet, but you can rest assured some reporter somewhere or some government agency somewhere will figure it out, and we'll all say, aha, now it makes sense. I think that's where we are, in the process. And we can't forget beef as well. Listen, to your point, Argentina and Brazil, they're not sending us, sirloin cuts and things like that. And it's not a whole lot of beef. It's not going to have a huge impact at the grocery store in terms of lowering prices. What it does is it's giving the packing companies that already control everything more leeway to buy less beef from American farmers. And if I could explain that real quick, let me tell you how that works. So if we buy more boxed beef from Brazil and Argentina, that comes here, and we have no country of origin labeling in the United States. So that frozen boxed beef can be mixed in with American beef, and it can be sold in the grocery stores, and it's much less
Okay.
expensive than the beef coming out of our own beef supply.
So that
So
crappy
imagine,
Argentinian beef could just be mixed in.
yeah, it's like
With
watering
quality
down a
American.
good bourbon
Okay, I
whiskey.
got you.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Well,
And
I tell you, I'm
so
with you. It was a compelling argument to me when I asked just regular folks like up at High Street Pub here in Jeff City, does anybody really give a damn if Ukraine is taken over? Nobody cared. right or wrong, because nobody cared. Well, I find even fewer people give a damn if Argentina falls off in the ocean, especially if they're actually harming us. But with that said, let me take one moment and thank our terrific sponsors. I was up last night in the great Northwest, Senator Hageman would say, where United Fiber lays the best rural broadband in the state of Missouri. And always, when you come to town, Will, you got to come up here and do our show sometime and join us here in the studio. When you do, we'll put you up somewhere because we care about you. We won't stick you somewhere awful. We'll stick you at the Courtyard by Marriott here in town. And then I always want to thank the folks who grow it, test it, manufacture it, package it, sell it, every possible thing. The members of the Mocan Trade Association. There is not one industry in this state. Nothing you can buy in this state is more Missouri than the products from the Mocan Trade Association. All right, well, let's talk a little politics. Yeah. Because I get around the state and do the history of each county. Matter of fact, Kelton, what county are we putting up this week?
I believe we're doing Atchison County this week.
Atchison County up in the very corner. Skidmore, Missouri, the biggest pool table in the state of Missouri, where, if you ever heard the story of Ken Rex McElroy, where the whole town shot him. They made every man take one shot.
Oh, yeah.
And when the FBI came to town, everybody said they was hiding under that damn pool table. We went up there and looked at the bar where that pool table. I swear, probably if they had, it didn't appear there was a lot of security cameras in Skidmore. Probably,
there really wasn't a whole lot of buildings in Skidmore, Missouri.
We went to the bar that he was shot out in front of. That Brian Dennehy movie churched it up a little bit, I will say.
Yeah.
We were going to try to buy and or steal that pool table. Jake didn't know we was going to steal it. He thought we was going to try to buy it. But we would have bought it if we could have found somebody. There just wasn't a lot of folks around Skidmore that day. We couldn't. There wasn't a pool table in there.
No, I didn't see any table at all in there.
I gotta ask Zell whatever happened to that damn thing.
Maybe Zell has it.
That's the kind of thing Zell might have. What up, Tarkio, Atchison County, good folks. There's a pattern of voting in this state, and it was the Civil War. You had where there were Germans, there were Republicans. Where the train depot stopped, like a Bolivar or Raleigh, had a higher level of Republicans because they were buying things from the Union Army. But the rest of the state was very Democratic. Then the Depression happened, and 2 generations of people were solidly Democratic. I'm from the Boot Hill area. Nowhere was more solid blue dog, didn't give a damn Democrat than the Boot Hill. And then things started to change. And I don't know that they changed over policies about farming or anything else. To me, it changed on guns and abortion. As the National Democratic Party changed their stance on guns and abortion, and the National Republican Party, the social issues realigned. You give me, I get around this state and I look at you look at the elections, you could almost go back to Abraham Lincoln's election in 1860, and for certain the re-election in 1864. In 1860, they wouldn't let Lincoln on the ballot a lot of places. Those places all followed that trend. And in 1864, they wouldn't let the Democrats vote at all in a lot of parts of the state. And those voting trends, that's kind of what I've seen from the state. Am I wrong?
No, I do want to tell everybody one thing because, I was just cutting my teeth in politics when this transition on abortion happened. And it wasn't so much that the Democratic Party changed on abortion. It's that a lot of our religious institutions around the country made it an activism point for political recruitment purposes. And I'm going to back that up with some facts right now, really quickly. A lot of people forget that the Southern Baptist Convention back before the 1980s actually had a plank in their convention that said abortion was okay in the case that a mother's life was in danger or that a child would be born with significant birth defects. And then a gentleman named Larry Falwell came along, and he figured out that he could use, the religious institutions of this country to push politicization in the churches, and that could be used to then drive people toward the Republican Party. There's a lot of great sociological and political science research out there, legitimate research from some really good academians that kind of walk us through that process. So, the Southern Baptist Convention of today, now, I did a lot of time in the Southern Baptist Church and the Methodist Church. I'm an Episcopalian now. I'm a believing Christian. I walk with the Lord every day. But I'm really honest about our own religious history and how that's impacted, the rural parts of the state in regard to these political concepts as well.
Well, let me just add, I've said many times, and publicly, privately, whatever, as I've always been a Republican, I don't bullshit folks. Some days you can be more proud of it than others, frankly. But, the truth is, you would have a lot better Republican policies in this state if it was a little more balanced. The policies the Republican Party puts forward would be far more effective and better Republican policies if the state was a little bit more balanced. Is there a way to you get around rural Missouri yourself, until the national Democrats moderate on some of these more woke issues and guns and abortion, can you really win until that starts at the top?
I think you can, depending on how you focus on these issues. So,
Okay.
let me tell you what I mean by that.
Yeah, take
So,
folks to school.
first of all, I always tell people I'm just like you. I don't hide the fact that I've been a Democrat for 35 years. I've been a rural county party chair. But you know what? The first time I ever voted a straight ticket ballot was in 2020. Before that, not once in my life had I ever voted a straight ticket ballot. I voted for the person on the ticket that I felt best represented what we needed here in rural America. And that's how
I've
I
ever
always
voted a straight ticket in my life. I
yeah.
don't think I ever have. Maybe when I was really young.
I did it 2020 on principle, to be completely honest with you. But when I look at these other issues, it's all in how you let yourself get defined. Okay, so if you look at the abortion issue, for example, I think it's really difficult to make an argument that the Democrats weren't right in regard to what the ramifications would be on regular reproductive health care provision in this country if the Supreme Court were to make the decision that they did. I mean, we literally do now have women that are sitting out in the parking lots of emergency rooms and their lives are in danger because they've got to reach a certain point before they can be treated. But look at Missouri. If you take the political label off of something, in other words, if it's not the Democrats introducing it, look at what we've passed here on ballot initiatives. We've passed the reproductive rights. We've passed marijuana legalization. We've passed mandatory. We kicked right to work out of the state.
Medicaid expansion.
There, all these, these
Why
Democratic.
is there no connection there? The exact same ballot, folks in this state will walk in and vote for abortion access, Medicaid expansion, the whole list. It's long. It's a very long list of policies I would associate with more Democratic perspectives. They'll go vote for every one of them, and then they'll go vote with the Republican for the state house, Congress, president. Where's that disconnect at?
I think you already know the answer to the question, but I appreciate you doing me a solid and asking me. I think it really just comes at this point from tribalism. I really do. And both parties are guilty of this. I want to say that right up front. It's not just the Republicans in the state. The minute you put that donkey or that elephant on a policy, you get this tribalism that causes people to stop looking at a policy from the perspective of whether or not it's good for the people of Missouri, and they look at it only through that political lens. When you do a ballot initiative, for the most part, you're taking that label off of the issue and you're asking people to consider it from the perspective of, is it good for us in the state of Missouri or is it not? And therefore, they make a decision based on that rather than the politicization.
But I mean, tribalism used to be people very tribalistic toward the Democratic Party. Now, I mean, number one, I think Donald Trump has a very, very special relationship with the people of this state. The people of this state love that man. Donald Trump has very clear flaws. I wouldn't buy a used truck off that son of a gun to save my life. But by the same common sense,
you're not wrong though.
The people of this state love that man. I watched with Barack Obama, and I guess being from the boot heel, I've seen racism close up. I know what it looks like. There's times in my life I have to check my upbringing and who I am to make sure that, I'm not viewing things through a racist lens, and I'm sure I have in the past.
We all do.
But I'll be honest with you, I watched with Barack Obama. There's some Republicans who hated that man. They hated him. And I wrote it off as racism, to be honest. I just thought, well, there's some latent racism, sometimes above the surface, about Obama. Yeah. And I just kind of thought, well, that's just racism, and it's a good thing for the country to have a black president. I think that speaks highly of us as a nation. That's something I was proud to see. I wouldn't have minded it be maybe different policies, but I thought that was a fine thing for this country. But with the Democrats, I mean, they hate Donald Trump. It looks I have folks in my family that love Donald Trump to an unhealthy amount. It's like, you okay, man? You're kind of getting out there. Yeah. By the same token, I have some friends in the cities. Boy, they just hate the guy, and it's not healthy for them personally, and I don't think it's politically productive.
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things about that. Number one, President Obama had the best performance of any Democratic presidential candidate in the state of Missouri
Yeah.
since Bill Clinton. And if I could take on, I do want to put my political hat on for a moment because I do have a political tech company that gets messaging out, not only for nonprofits, but for Democratic candidates running in rural America. Like we did all the
What's that
stuff in the
called?
OSOF, and it's called Highlander Political Strategies. And I do want to say this, and that is that, we do polling. And most of the polling in rural America, a lot of people don't think about this, but it's very similar to polling in inner city America. It's the politics of discontent. There is a shared vision inside our urban cities of color and in rural America. They don't fix our streets. They don't give us the technology that we need so our kids can compete on the education front. We get ignored. Our hospitals don't measure up. We've got huge deserts in regard to OBGYN care, cancer care, pediatrics care, et cetera. And typically in rural America, what we see in the polling is that we're not necessarily just voting one party or another. We're voting for the person that screams the loudest that they're going to help us, whether they do help us or not. And that's why you've seen this shift. Look at it. You saw they voted for Obama, they voted for Trump, they voted for Biden, they came back and voted for Trump. You can't explain that away with racism or any other simple answers. To get that much shifting in the votes, you've got to find another cause for that. And a lot of that is the politics of discontent. And until we figure that out in the Democratic Party.
Barack Obama was this highly aspirational, amazingly charismatic guy. Whether you want to vote for him or not, or agree with his policies, Barack Obama is a charismatic leader, historically charismatic, but also the Republicans had invaded a country for no reason and crashed the stock market. I mean, there was discontent, brought that '08 electorate to. He was an aspirational guy, but he kind of could afford to be because, let's be honest, the Republicans just flubbed it all up. I mean, they did an objectively bad job.
That's true, but let me criticize my own party for a minute. You tell me if you disagree with this. The one thing you can say about Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump, all three of them, even though they do it in their vastly different ways, is there was a cognizant and a concentrated effort there to say, I understand what you're going through and I am going to fix the problem. Now, they all three did that in different ways. When I heard that message out of the other Democratic candidates that had run, like Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, can you honestly say that you heard a viable, concentrated, and persuasive message out of those other candidates that made people feel comfortable that they were going to be advocating for them in rural America? If we're brutally honest with ourselves as Democrats, we have to admit that those messages were not cogent and they were not delivered in an effective way.
What's the strategy that Democrats take forward? Because right now, I mean, we've seen Senator Joe Manchin out of West Virginia was a Democrat for a long time, actually withstood a lot of the Republican takeover of that state. It was like, I think, a plus 50 Trump state. He managed to stay in for quite a long time. But Senator Manchin and senators like him have kind of stepped away from the party. I mean, he became an independent and eventually left office. Do you think there's a problem with the Democratic Party now that they're kind of losing the old conservative Democrat style that helped them win majorities in the past? I mean, both parties have succeeded in the past when they were able to expand their vote to when there was liberal Republicans and conservative Democrats, that's when the parties were at their strongest and most able to actually appeal to voters. And now we're seeing a lot less liberal Republicans. And now we're also seeing a lot less conservative Democrats. I grew up in Independence, so I was just like a block away from the Truman House. And I could be wrong on this. I don't try to speak for Harry Truman. But I feel like Harry Truman could maybe not be a resident in the current Democratic Party right now. Am I getting that right? Is there maybe like an issue, nationally speaking, when it comes to Democrats to getting these old conservative voters to join back with them?
If I'm being completely honest, I would disagree a little bit on that. And let me tell you why. Because, in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, the largest political movement in rural America was also its most progressive liberal movement that this country's ever seen, the Grange movement.
Yep.
Well ahead of FDR and then Truman, allowing African Americans into the military and allowing them to serve in officers' role. Well before that, the Grange movement in this country was pushing back against tariffs. It was pushing back against wealth consolidation during the Gilded Age. I mean, there were a lot of people in the Grange movement that were screaming loudly, we need to take money away from the wealthy and give it to the poor. That's why Huey Long later on, in the Great Depression had such a powerful voice. Even though you can argue that he was a crook, he was popular because he believed in battling against the consolidation of wealth. The other thing that they did is when they started the Grange Party, they put people of color and women in their leadership ranks. So I would make the argument that liberalism has existed in rural America for a very, very long time. I think the problem is a lot of people that live in rural America today don't know that their great-great-grandparents were some of the loudest screaming liberals on the streets of Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, and Nebraska that they ever would have heard in their lives. They would have called them woke. So that's my first answer.
To me,
the second answer is, let me ask you guys a question.
Yeah.
When you think about, let's just say abortion, okay? When abortion became legal with Roe v. Wade in the 70s, can you honestly formulate for me, because I had to ask myself this question, what has changed about the Democratic Party's stance on abortion? What's changed since 1970 when abortion became legal and liberal Republicans also believed that Roe v. Wade was a good policy for this country? How have the Democrats changed their stance on it?
Right here.
Yeah.
You had this guy started his career as a Catholic in South St. Louis City who was pro-life, and this guy started his career as a Republican running statewide who was pro-choice. And then sometime in the 80s, this guy became extremely pro-choice and this guy became extremely pro-life, or they probably would have been primaried out of their parties. I do think there was, Joe Teasdale was the last pro-life Democrat nominee for governor, and he ran against Kit Bond, who was a pro-choice Republican. They switched. I think the Republican Party switched as well. And I think when they did, I go to Jefferson County. Jefferson County I always thought of as a Union Democrat county. When the McKennas were there, it was all Democrat. As the National Party became less pro-life and less pro-gun, and the Republican Party became more pro-life and pro-gun, Victor Callahan was a pro-life, pro-gun Democrat winning an independence. It took 2 senators later, and there's a Republican there now. I think the folks, I probably would say social issues maybe shouldn't be the reason you vote. I don't know that I think there'd be less abortions if the state was more successful. I think where you find places that have, higher income level, folks are happier, there are fewer abortions. But that's not the answer anybody wants.
No, you're right. You're right. I tell people this all the time. When the Democratic Party is in power, a lot of people don't realize this. Number one, statistically, it's a proven fact. I don't even argue it anymore because I know it's true. When the Democratic Party has the national reins of power, the economy does better. Every single Democrat that's served in office since World War II has presided over a better economy than every single Republican that has served. And abortions drop under a Democratic president because of what you just said. When the economy does better, the number of abortions in this country drop. So I get what you're saying, but you're bringing up the litmus test thing, which I disagree with as well. The litmus test of, saying you have to believe these things in order to run. I don't agree with that. I disagree with a lot of people in my party about that. But here's what I think. If the Democrats do a better job of effectively saying this, we believe that a woman has the right to determine what's happens to her body. That's where the story ends. And you juxtapose that to what we have under this new law, which is literally, I'm not sure what I can say or not say, but you can cut this out if I shouldn't say it. But if you are sexually assaulted or raped, or you're the victim of incest in this country, right now, under the current Supreme Court ruling, you have to have that child if you live in certain states. When you look at the radicalism of those two stances, One of those is much less radical than the other one. And I would argue that it's the Democratic Party stance on abortion that's less radical and not the Republican Party's, which says if your dad comes into your room in the middle of the night and does horrible things and a child is a result of that, you've got to have that baby.
I
I've never
agree with
heard
you
of
totally.
anything more radical.
But I'll tell you, that I think that's an extreme characterization, but I'm not sure there's not a lot of truth to it. I got a lot of kinfolks that 100% would take that extreme classification and they'd agree with it. And they will
Me
not
too,
consider
brother.
voting
Me
for
too.
someone
Yeah.
that,
Me
that
too.
doesn't. And with gun rights, folks I went to high school with, if you want to take anybody's gun away, even anybody's gun, they don't want to hear what you have to say about making their life better. Whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent, there's some truth to that. Well, break this down for me. There's a couple interesting Senate races in this state. One
Yeah.
is a Lee Summit race. My gut tells me if Patterson wins that primary, he starts off as the favorite. But down in your neck of the woods, there's the most competitive state Senate race in the state right now. Melanie Stinnett is running. Brian Gellner's discussing running against Betsy Faughn, tremendous recruit. Two top tier candidates. If it's either Gellner or Stinnett, but let's assume right now it's Stinnett versus Faughn. What advice would you give to Betsy Faughn? Now this is actually an urban district. It's just the city of Springfield.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to Betsy Faughn right now on how to reach out to let's say a union man? Because I think the Democrats in this state, when the supermajority hit, it was because a lot of union men started voting Republican. What advice would you have for her to win that race?
Well, it's the same advice I would give every candidate, and that is to listen more and talk less. And I think Betsy does a really good job of that. Like, I'll give you an example. I was at a candidate meeting down in Texas not too long ago, and all the politicians were up front, and they had labor in the audience. And somebody asked the question, how do we do a better job of reaching out to labor? And they all answered the question, and not a single one of them said, why don't we just ask the labor in the room, how can the Democratic Party do a better job of reaching out to them? And we do the same thing with young people. You know, in our efforts to pretend we've got all the answers, we do a lot of talking and we don't do enough listening. So I think what Betsy or any other candidate, regardless, because listen, even at Back 40 Action, I'm a Democrat, but we're nonpartisan. In a heartbeat, I would support a Republican in a primary that believed in good policy for rural America. And my advice to Betsy, even though she doesn't need it, would be listen to labor. Let them tell you what they're looking for in a candidate, and where those ideologies align, fight for them every day in Jefferson City, you know, to do the right thing. We just don't do enough list. My favorite speech to give is in front of, I went down to Texas and talked to 300 conservative Republican cattlemen. I love doing that. I enjoy that more than I love preaching to the choir any day of the week.
Well, I guess the fundamental question I'd have is, you know, you have to take back a supermajority before you can get to a majority.
Right.
It feels like the post-Trump, whoever the Republicans have won't be Trump. I mean, Trump knows how to talk to rural folks. He knows how to talk to union guys. And I saw Joe Scarborough, who I don't know what party Joe Scarborough's in now. I used to like his show when he was just running around with that meek, and now that they're together, he's kind of henpecked. But he gave a good piece of advice, I thought. I wanted to get your opinion. He said Democrats should stop worrying about Trump. I don't think many real people think he's a king or need these silly hats and all that. He said leave him alone. He's not running again. Run against the Republican brand. I thought, you know, some days when teams face Bob Gibson, you know, some days they just had to tip their hat and say, you know what, the old boy beat us today. Trump has won 2 elections. I wonder if Democrats shouldn't start running against the brand of Republicans instead of Donald Trump. He's won. It's over.
He's won the presidency, but guys, if I can put that political consultant hat on for a minute, he's very good for the Democratic Party once he wins. If you look at his first term, we had the biggest sweep of Democratic victories in a midterm that we'd had in a very long time under Donald Trump. Now you're looking, he's got the lowest approval rating of any president since World War II. And there are 2 numbers in there that if I was a Republican consultant, it would really concern me. One is he's had a 9% drop in his support among rural Americans, which is the largest drop of any Republican president in rural America. But the one that would really scare me,
like
and we've
89 to 80.
No, okay. So, guys, there's so much to talk about. All right. So, the number that we use to say that President Trump has a 70% rating in rural America, that number comes from a very specific set of numbers. We looked at the top 400 rural counties in the country and only those 400, and we looked at the voting results just in those 400 counties. Nowhere else do we calculate in the rural vote, meaning in Massachusetts, there are rural counties that are all farmers that vote, more significantly for the Democratic Party. When you calculate in all rural voters, that supports around 60%. Okay. The polling shows us two things. Number one, he's seen a 9% drop in his support among rural America, mainly driven by healthcare and by the rural economy. And then the other thing that's even more frightening, and the Democrats have suffered with this in rural America, he's got the lowest approval rating among independent, unaffiliated voters of any president in 100 years. It's all the way down to 27%. So I think that the Democrats, regardless of the mistakes that they make, they're riding with this tailwind behind them. We're seeing we've had multiple races across the country that Republicans won by 15, 17, 25% that have gone Democrat. So Trump's very good for the Democratic Party when it's a non-presidential year. The
Is he good
question
for
that
the
we've got
Democratic Party in the
answered.
state of Missouri?
Um, I'll say two things. I'm not naive to your point. Missouri is a stronger Trump state now than Mississippi and Alabama.
Yeah.
And I would say that the trend we're seeing nationwide definitely isn't as reflected as it is in here in Missouri. But yes, if you look at the overall voting trends at the local level, we've had about a 4% swing toward the Democrats. Since Trump was elected to office. This next election, though, to your point, is going to prove out whether or not Missouri is the exception to the rule.
Yeah, because I know soybean farmers who are about to go bankrupt that if they could vote for Trump a fourth time, they would.
Yeah. I
I
know it was painful to watch 60 Minutes the other night where they were blaming Trump's policies, but they just could not bring themselves to blame him.
I've always felt like Trump's enemies are the oxygen he gets. When you're sitting on your back porch in Dexter, Missouri, and you look and you
Yeah.
see people in St. Louis wearing pussy hats, walking around saying we're not going to have a king, folks just look and say them poor city people are just out of their minds. I think when I look at Anderson Cooper and the folks in the traditional media and how much they hate him, I'm like, I don't. Trump's got his problems, but I actually like Trump better than them some bitches. You know what I mean? I always
Well, we
thought
don't do a good
his
job
enemies
of
give
telling
him his
personal
oxygen.
stories, though. That's the problem. We let those people define who we are as the Democratic Party in rural
That's a
America.
fact.
When I go out and talk, I talk about my farm accident. And I say one party wants to fund that new rural hospital we built in Polk County in 1992 or in 1982 that would allow me, with that same farm injury, to get to the hospital in 36 minutes instead of laying out there as a 12-year-old kid bleeding for 2 hours. Do you want to go back to that? Guess what, boys? I have yet to have a single person raise their hand and say, yes, I want to go back to that.
I tell you though,
When you ask,
as far as Missouri goes, I watched this with the Republican Party when I was just becoming aware there even was state politics. When the Republicans were in the minority here in the legislature and had Democrats all up and down every statewide office, the Republican Party had to have Missouri to win the presidency. They had to have the Missouri to win the United States Senate and to win Congress. And so they invested money here on infrastructure. The Democrat
did.
Party, really since Senator McCaskill lost, has just pulled up stakes, and they really pulled up stakes a little even before that. The Democrat Party's decided we can win Congress, the presidency, and the U.S. Senate, and we never have to care about Missouri. Until that changes, I mean that party infrastructure money matters. Can anything change until you guys can get the national party to realize you're there again and worth fighting for?
it's slowly starting to change. Is it happening fast enough? No. Like I told you before, what Papa said, if you're going to be a member of an organization, you got to be its greatest critic. And I'm one of those. Couple of things that are changing to the positive, and then I'll talk about what else I think needs to change. They have created a People's Cabinet for rural America, and I'm on that. And one of the things I told them when I agreed to be on it is I said, I'm not going to go out there and shill for you. I'm not going to go stand in front of my people in rural America and try to make the argument that you've been doing everything right, because you haven't been. As a matter of fact, you've been doing everything wrong. So if you want me to go out there and listen to people say, this is what we need to do to make the Democratic Party stronger in rural America, I'll do that, but I'm truly going to listen. And then when I bring that feedback back from rural America, by God, you better do something with it. Because if this is just an exercise in me doing a song and dance in front of rural America to make them think everything's okay, I'm not interested in it. So I'll say that, number one. Number two, they did just change their finance policy in red state. So Ken Martin, who came from Minnesota, which is the fourth largest agricultural state in the country, he convinced the DNC to start investing in additional. It's a lot of money in red states that's supposed to be targeted directly down to Democratic candidates running in rural America. Now, it's not enough. I will tell you right up front, it's not enough. Needs to be more, but they've made the first steps to start putting money in.
Will see any of that money?
Well, Betsy doesn't live in a rural county, to your point earlier, so she probably won't see any of that money. What I'd be talking about, do you guys remember when Al Skaliski, do you remember that name? He ran for the state senate down in my district in Polk County. He'd been an ag teacher for 26 years, row crop farmer, cattleman, had forgotten more about agriculture than anybody knew, and lost in that race and didn't get any support from the state party or the national party. That was a travesty that a guy that, knew that much about agriculture and had introduced generation after generation of young kids into agriculture didn't get any support. A candidate like that now will see that money.
An old buddy of mine's talking about running, Frank Barnett's, former state senator, is talking about running the 8th. Now, I'll be honest with you.
There's a draft Frank committee going, I hear.
Well, Frank's a good old boy. I respect Frank Barnett's. I would say, folks in Southeast Missouri, they don't just admire the president; they love him. And I think it's going to be an interesting. I guess this kind of leads to my last question. What does Missouri look like post-Trump?
Well, the big question is going to be the big question post-Trump is going to be what steps in to fill that gap. Because once Trump is gone, like frankly, me personally, and all my buddies are good old boys that voted for Trump. If I decided my friendships based on politics, I'd be a lonely guy down here in Southwest Missouri. So the answer to that question, I think, is who or what steps in afterwards. But I really do believe this. If the Democratic Party can do a better job of appealing to personal stories and telling people in rural America, this is what we can do for you to make rural America better. It may take think how long it took the Republicans to win rural America. It didn't happen in a week. Hell, it took them 35 years. And it may take us that long to win it back. But if we don't start, we're never going to get it done.
I guess just to bring it full, number one, J.D. Vance could win Missouri, but that old boy, that eyeliner and stuff, I don't think that dog will hunt. I mean, if the Democrats put up, now if they come out with some Kamala Harris, they're probably going to work in Missouri, but if they put up somebody like that Kentucky governor or something,
Andy Beshears, I
don't know that he wins Missouri, but that actually would be a plausible choice because that Vance seems a little weird to me, just on the face of it. But I guess it took the Republicans 40 years, but what it really took, in my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, but I got a front row seat to taking the majority. They took that majority on guns and abortion. That's what took that majority. And I don't know that Jefferson County has changed all that much on guns and abortion. I think they're pro-life, but they're not comfortable with just the extremities that you mentioned. But they're pro-gun. I think they are comfortable with the extremities on pro-gun. I just wonder, was it the Republicans actually working and succeeding, or was it National Party realignment with issues that spoke to those folks?
I think it was a combination of both things. But listen, let's look at guns. That's a great question to end on. Let's look at guns, all right? First of all, I always joke with my friends that are always talking about, well, there's a day of reckoning coming and all this. And I always tell them, you're going to be really surprised when you go knock on a rural Democrat's door about the gun ownership issue, because we own just as many as you guys do. Sure. And we joke around about that. But listen, the Yeah, the largest assault weapons ban in this country was not passed by a Democratic president. It was passed by a Republican president, and it was carried on under another Republican administration. I have yet to hear one Republican answer this question for me. Name the central piece of gun legislation that a Democrat has passed since World War II to take your guns away. And you know why they can't answer that question? Because it's never happened.
I'll tell you though, I will say this. This is something that just since I've owned the Missouri Times,
Yeah,
I think there are very sensible and logical arguments to limit guns.
yeah,
I don't think that is, whether you agree with it or not. There's a logical discussion to be had there. The Moms Demand Action has become a very viable force in the Democrat Party. It is viable in the St. Louis area. I've actually seen a rally of 400 people with my own eyes, shocked the hell out of me. I think those are logical discussions to be had, but nobody I went to high school with does.
yeah. But even out here where you and I live, it's like 80% of hunters in this state believe we shouldn't have bump stocks. They believe we don't need clips of over, 30
Well, I
rounds. I
agree with
mean,
the clips. I mean, it hit home to me one day. We lived in Baldwin for a minute.
yeah,
My son, he had to go to school there. He said he'd rather done 2 years in St. Quentin than 1 year there. But I was walking by this restaurant and I saw this video of another school shooting. They become a little bit sing song. You know, you see so many of them,
yeah,
unfortunately. But that school building looked like his. And you want to talk about your blood running cold when you see a building on
yeah.
TV with a lower third that says school shooting and it looks like yours. All of a sudden,
It
those
hits
clips.
home.
I tell you what, I don't understand the argument for those clips. I really don't.
I don't either, but my point is that even 80% of us gun owners believe that these
Yeah.
changes should be made law, and we can't even agree on that. We can't even pass laws on the things we agree with. I'll tell you another thing as a gun owner that worries me. I was having lunch in a Chinese restaurant in Bolivar, Missouri about 8 months ago.
I've
Since we
been to
have
that
this
restaurant.
open
There's only two of them. I bet I have a
Asian
50%
fusion,
chance of being there. Yep.
Asian fusion,
I got an old
yeah.
buddy that's from Bolivar. He
There
used
you
to work
go.
up
There you
here.
go. I was sitting, and I think this has hurt us as gun owners. I was sitting in there eating, and we've got this open carry law now where any age can carry any kind of gun anywhere they want to go. There's no training. There was a mom in there with 3 kids, and this guy came in double strapping, a couple of Wild West suit,
Yeah.
sharpshooters on his hips, and he sat down to eat. That mom got up and she took her kids and she left the restaurant because there are 3 kinds of people in this country. There are us, the ones that were raised around guns and have a healthy respect for
And
them.
don't
There
double
are the
strap.
people.
That's the most peacock and bullshit. If you
Exactly.
double strap, you couldn't bust a grape in a fruit fight.
Exactly. Exactly. The second group are the people that have been harmed by gun violence in this country. And the third group is the largest group, and that's the people that couldn't care less either way. If the voice of gun ownership becomes that guy that double straps and can't hit a grape, if that becomes the face of gun ownership in this country, then that large third group is going to end up being the group that takes guns away and not any party in this country. And we need to be cognizant of that.
Well, I sure appreciate it. Back 40. It is doing some very good work. Whatever your political perspective is, it is an honest, genuine perspective that I think the state needs. But before we go, I guess just to depress everybody before we take off for the week with the Daily Show, how is there any hope for our Cardinals? I'm just so depressed. I feel I don't know. I'm lighting candles to St. Jude these days.
Got to tell you, until there's a change in ownership, I don't know if we're ever gonna, if we're ever, I kind of feel like, you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but I kind of feel like the glass days in Kansas City where the farm club was just used like a auto factory and we sold all of our best players for cash. I kind of feel like we're starting to get that way in St. Louis. So I
I'm
don't
really
know if we
rooting
can
for
get.
the Royals to go to Kansas. I think even you'd have to admit what a great job by our governor if we put a dome on Arrowhead so it's not so cold and we get rid of the Royals. That'd be a wonderful. I mean, Kehoe would assure his reelection if he get rid of the Royals.
Can I ask for my vote back if that happens?
Yeah. Boys, I gotta tell you, when I was laying in that hospital when I was 12 years old, I was in there for 2 months, and then I had to rehab for 6 months afterwards. Had like 11 follow-up surgeries. I'm laying in there feeling sorry for myself one day as a 12-year-old kid, and you know the old church ladies, you know who I'm talking about,
Oh,
the
yeah,
old women
my
in
mom.
church. Yeah, one of them came
Come lay
walking
hands
in
on
with
you.
an envelope. Yeah. One of them came walking in with an envelope, and out of that envelope, she pulled a Kansas City Chiefs pennant, and every member of the team had signed it. I'm talking Art Still, Bill
Oh,
Kenny, Arnold
Bill
Morgado.
Kenny.
Yeah. And when I moved back to Missouri from North Carolina in 2007, the moving company lost that pennant, and it broke my heart. But I've been an avid Chiefs fan. You'd have to shoot me before I'd ever give up on them. And I'm the same way with the Cardinals, but I would like to see a change in ownership.
I tell you, we come in last place, and the response was to give this manager a 2-year extension. The media is the softest media in the world.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it. The 83 win season, you thought he won back-to-back World Series. This Bloom was supposed to come in and be our salvation. I see no urgency. He seems totally fine with being the shits. It is, yeah, I could cry. I really could. I've never really felt hopeless about the team. I see no hope whatsoever. I see the embrace of losing, the almost comfortability of losing. It is
And to walk into Busch Stadium and see all those empty seats, that's never happened before.
And they don't seem to give a damn about it. Not one damn. They've got this coaching staff that sucks, that nobody else would hire to do anything. Wouldn't even hire to mow the grass for the Dodgers. I don't understand it. It is exasperating to the point of tears. Let's end on a good note, though. Speaking of Back 40 Democrats, next summer is going to be, I think, the 50th anniversary of Jerry Litton's plane crash, and the folks up there are doing an event up there. I will text you when I get the full information from Senator Black. If you have time, I'd sure love to go up there with you. I think it's going to be a very good celebration of an amazing legend in North Missouri.
Yeah, my aunt worked on his campaign, and I listened to his old tapes, guys. A lot of my delivery style comes from that. Hey, I want to say one thing, if I could be a little bit corny for just a minute.
Go right ahead. You're in the right place for it.
Well, we've put on our partisan hats today, and I love a good conversation about Republican, Democrat, but I want to end on this note. Back 40 Action is a nonpartisan organization, and even though I'm a Democrat, I really believe strongly, and I build my entire approach around this. We have got to come together as Democrats and Republicans and independents in rural Missouri and around the country to just get good policy passed, because we are struggling. Our 400 largest agricultural counties in this country have been shrinking for 3 decades. We're losing schools, we're losing hospitals, and we can only change that if we put politics aside and vote for good policy. And I believe that, boys, more than I believe anything else out there. So I'm not preaching the Democratic message when I go out there. I'm preaching the rural American speech, and I'm doing it as a Democrat, but I will work with any Republican, any independent, anywhere I can to get better policy for rural America. And I just want to make that point.
Well, Will, we sure appreciate your time. Next time you're up, love for you to stop in. Maybe do one of these here in studio. If you're coming, Aaron probably will make the time to come. But we'd absolutely love to have you. Text me anytime you got something good going on with Back 40.
Yeah, let's just do it. I'd love that, and I'm in on the Lytton event. You just reach out to me and give me the dates, and I'll just park my truck at your house. It's got 220,000 miles, but it still doesn't leak oil. I'll park it at your house, and you can drive over.
Well, if you're sitting on 220, we'll drive mine to Chillicothe. How about that?
There we go.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate it.
I am. Thank you, guys.
You too. So I really was looking forward to that. What a good old boy. I mean,
Great guy.
There's a genuine quality that comes off. I listened to some of the stuff he's done. He has a genuine quality that I kind of like, and I like the fact he's real about it. I mean, he wasn't sitting there saying, "Oh, all we got to do is have one more Black Lives Matter rally, and folks in Shannon County are going to.
I think one more no Kings rally might do it.
I mean, he didn't.
They might
dog his
topple
own
the
people,
Trump
but
admin with that.
He didn't come out and say, "Oh, Donald Trump's Hitler" and all that silliness. And that to me is you have to just move past Trump. Now maybe look, I think nationally he might be right. I don't know, but in Missouri, I don't think Betsy Fogle running against Donald Trump is the move.
No.
I just don't. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I don't see the polling that Burke and that Doug and all them will run a good race. I think Betsy Fogle running on. I'm Betsy Fogle, and I care about this community, and my father has cared about this community, and I don't think there's that many people in Springfield to be persuaded that think Donald Trump's a king.
No, I don't think the strategy for Democrats is to, when running locally, is to point to the national party and say that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and for a while that was true of the Republicans in this state.
Yep.
They could not point to their national party and get much backup. I tell you what, I want to give one more shout out before we go. I think Kelton, I don't think we have a show. We have no more shows this week.
Correct.
We will have a show in Missouri up, Atchison County. Boy, we had a good time up there.
It was
good
fun.
Old boys, a couple of commissioners. You're going to hear the story about a certain judge, Fisher, who took his boat. He wanted to take his boat to work, so he put his boat in up there on the Missouri at Atchison County and was driving it down to Jeff City, and he ran out of gas, which is hilarious. And you can hear that full story Wednesday on Show Missouri. We're off TV for 2 weeks. We'll be back with our show from the Missouri Association of Counties Conference. We're going to have a good time. Steve Hobbs and that crew, Kara Bright, who we always want to be sure we thank and stay on her good side. Ain't no future in being on Kara's bad side, as we discuss on a show of Missouri from Maryville up in Nottoway County. Anyhow, I want to thank everybody for joining. We appreciate everyone. And lastly, it was a terrific night last night. I went up to St. Joseph and went to the MRP fundraiser. It was an honoring Stan Herzog, an absolute business legend. And even more than that, it was Peter Kinder and Brad Lager were there, two men who ran against each other in a really tough campaign. And to see them two burying, I don't know that there was a hatchet to be buried, but to see them two on the stage, was a dozen years ago, I would not have thought I would have been in St. Joseph doing that last night. And I think it was a real sign of unity of the Republican Party, a real testament to both Peter Kinder and Brad Lager, and what kind of guys they are, and a real testament to the legend of Stan Herzog, a legendary Missouri businessman. It was a real, it was a terrific thing to see in person. I'm glad I was there. They were the unity of the Republican Party. You don't have the success they've had without it. But like he mentioned tribalism. Like every tribe, you have rivals, and to see these two guys put the old grudges aside and be together, I thought was a really, really great thing. So anyhow, we will be back. We'll be back here. Kelton, we're going to do a show the Monday after Thanksgiving?
We sure can.
Why don't we, to keep our word, let's promise the Tuesday.
That's fine with me.
And I'll get us a good guest.
Oh, okay. I'll hold you to that.
No, but I tell you, I like Will. Will's a good guest.
Yeah.
We'll bring somebody fun in here the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. Y'all, thank you so much. We talk what we're thankful for. I'm thankful for the folks that watch this show. They help put food on our table at Thanksgiving. Everybody here, and we're very grateful to you. We will we'll take a little Thanksgiving break. We'll see you at Show Missouri tomorrow, and we'll see you back here after Thanksgiving. The TWMP Daily. Get with Miles.